Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game SO. Today we're continuing the series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, more specifically in this instance, the work-in-progress Sega Saturn core. Because about 10 days ago, SRG320 gave us a new core, fixing up all of the interlacing issues over analog video, as well as utilizing dual core to fix some speed up in games. And he's now released another core which has a ton of different bug fixes in it, and it really feels like this core is starting to get buttoned up and getting towards that finish line. So we're going to go over all of the improvements today. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to support the channel, you got a Patreon link down below as well. But right off the top, in the GitHub patch notes, Virtual On was mentioned, and this is absolutely an amazing game. It did fix some graphical bugs in the most recent update, and I would say that watching this footage, I can't detect anything that makes me think it's not running on real Sega Saturn hardware. The speed, the clarity, all of the graphics, all of the layering priorities, everything here just looks like you put the disc in a real console and captured it with RGB out. And that's exactly what we want to see from cores like this, an indistinguishable gameplay experience from the real hardware to the FPGA code, because at the core of the MiSTer project, it really is just recreating that silicon in code, and you wanted to do the exact same thing. Now again, you guys have tons more eyes than I do, so if you see anything you don't like in the visual appearance here or gameplay department, just leave me a comment down below and tell me about it. But I've watched this footage front, back, left to right, up to down, and I can't detect anything that doesn't look correct. And if you've never played Virtual On, again, it is one of those amazing Sega ports from the arcade to Sega Saturn. I'd say it's probably one of the most successful ports from the Model 2 to the Saturn hardware, really showing that when Sega developers really took their time and worked hard on a port, you could get something incredible. Because for every The House of the Dead, there is a Virtual On, and it is so worth playing. But again, this is a game that we've tested pretty consistently through this entire series, back when it was basically looking like absolute garbage. That's not a knock on the core was just that early, to the point in time where we are now, where every single pixel looks exactly where it should be, and there really isn't anything in the footage that would betray the fact that this isn't real Sega Saturn footage. We're getting to the point where the core now, if I uploaded a review of this and just said I captured on real Sega Saturn hardware with an RGB cable out, I don't think anyone would be able to tell that it wasn't a true Sega Saturn console. And that really is the ultimate goal of projects like this, again, to just basically blur the line between real hardware and FPGA recreation. But if you want to see the notes on the current update, I'll just leave a link down below to SRG320's GitHub page, and just so you're aware, because it confused a couple of people in the last few videos, when I say patch notes, I'm not talking about the game being patched, I'm just talking about the current core update and the bugs that it fixes, kind of like it's an update and you get patch notes on a video game you would play online. Now moving back over to Dead or Alive, this has definitely seen speed improvements since the last time we talked about it. There is barely any slowdown in the entire game, and I would have to check this against real hardware to see if there's any slowdown in that build as well. But the fluidity in this motion here is just going to be so much better than it was in any sort of previous build, because now you'll see with the interlacing fix, everything looks incredible on the screen. All of the motion cadence is true to what it should be. There really isn't any issues with Dead or Alive here right now. You saw a tiny bit of slowdown there, but again, it is much improved, and I would have to really check against real hardware with the exact same stages and the exact same characters doing the exact same moves to really be able to detect whether or not that is something that would happen on real hardware. But if you do know or have any thoughts, leave me a comment down below and let me know what you think. And do be aware the dual RAM build still exists, and it is going to fix some of these slowdowns as well. The core now has a single RAM build and a dual RAM build, and while it did for a long time, now the dual RAM build is going to give you more functionality than single. It's only going to improve the speed on like a handful of games at this point in time, around 5, so I'm not saying to run out and buy a second RAM stick and upgrade your MiSTer at this point in time. Let's just wait and see until the core is 100% finished, how everything lands, and then from there, if you want to switch your MiSTer over to a dual RAM build, you can do so, because there's going to be a lot of information we glean between now and then as to what kind of RAM you might want to use and what kind of RAM is going to perform the best. But I would say the music in this game sounds spectacular, so go ahead and listen for 45 seconds. I'll be back with more tests.
Get ready. Ready, one!
Sounds great, looks great, plays great, and that slowdown seems to be pretty close to dead on the money of a real Sega Saturn console, pun very much intended for Dead or Alive. But if you have any thoughts on the slowdown, tell me down below, because again, I'm going to check against real hardware once this core gets closer to being buttoned up. But moving on to another game that's seen some bug fixes since the last time we talked about it is Sega Touring Car Championship. And while honestly, of all the Sega arcade racing ports to the Saturn, this one is definitely my least favorite. It is still fun to test it on the core, and it's one of those titles people have definitely played it, but compared to Daytona USA or Sega Rally, I would definitely put this in a far third place finish. And that's not for me to try to convince you that the game isn't good, it just really doesn't hit as well as any of the arcade racing games that Sega ported over to the Saturn. But now it definitely looks a lot better, because last time there was some decent graphical corruption in the overall gameplay experience. But this is running fast, it's running fluid, and it is controlling exactly how it always did, which is to say it's really easy to just basically overshoot a turn and 100% go off the track, and all of that wibbling in the polygons at the edges of the screen should be there on real hardware as well. It's just one of those things, how the Saturn would drop polygons and have a little bit of warping at the edges. It almost feels like the ground is basically falling out behind you, but that's something that we saw in a lot of different Sega racing games and other racing games on the platform as well. There's just something about Touring Car Championship though that's always been very difficult to control in my opinion, and big thanks to Andy D for helping with the captures today as well. He clearly had as hard of a time as I always do. But to see the improvements on this game are awesome, and to see how fast it runs on the core and real Sega Saturn hardware was definitely impressive back in the day. They got all of the performance out of the Saturn they could here. It's just something about the control scheme that's never really clicked. But over on the Model 2 side of things as well, it is a game that I've never 100% enjoyed. You tell me down below if there's maybe something I am missing. I'm not saying it's a bad game, I'm just saying that when you compare it to stuff like Daytona and Sega Rally, it really is hard for it to live up to those lofty expectations. Had this not had the Sega name on it, I think a lot of people would have enjoyed it a lot more, but there was big hopes and dreams when this game was coming over to the Saturn, and it didn't really 100% hit. But as far as the performance of the game on the Sega Saturn core is concerned, this is another title where I really don't see anything in the footage that would make me think I wasn't just watching a direct Sega Saturn capture. So if you do see anything, leave me that comment down below. But otherwise, Sega Touring Car Championship seems to be basically perfect on the core. Now moving over to another game that had bad graphical bugs and is a much better racing game is Outrun on Sega Saturn. We're doing both the North American as well as the Japanese release of this game, because sometimes one would run and the other wouldn't on the early days of the core, so we're going to check both out. But last core, the ground, the roadway in this game was just a rainbow pixelated mess. There was definitely a bug in there, and this game was mentioned in the patch notes by SRG320, and you can tell today this looks every bit as good as Outrun should on the Sega Saturn. The scaling is fluid, everything is great, and of course it's got an incredible soundtrack that sounds amazing coming out of the FPGA core. So 30 seconds worth of music, and I'll be right back. I don't think anything will ever beat the music from Outrun to Outrunners to Outrun 2. It is just some of the best music Sega's ever made, and it is such an iconic sound. If it didn't sound correct, you would be able to tell instantaneously on the Sega Saturn core, but to my ears that sounds every bit as good as the music from Outrun ever did. And just so you know, we're currently on the US version of the game, and it is really interesting that this game has some changes between the US and Japanese regions that would cause one to work better than the other in previous versions of the MiSTer FPGA core. Never quite sure why that is, it was just one of those oddities, and I'll tell you as soon as we switch over to the Japanese version. But again, if you saw this game on the last core, you would have seen that the roadway was just that rainbow pixelated mess. I saw a couple photos on Discord, and it was obvious to anybody looking at it that there was a bug in that, so SRG320 went in, patched that up, and now you can see that the entirety of the graphics look exactly like they should. So we have game over on the North American version of the game, so let's move over to the Japanese version, and we're getting the exact same result here. And if anybody does know why why these games are doing different things just because they were different regions, do leave me that comment down below, because in all of the testing, sometimes there's these weird aberrations that no one can really explain, but they just exist. Like sometimes the North American version of Outrun would launch while the Japanese version would freeze on early cores. It was one of those strange things. It felt like there was a ghost in the machine, and a lot of times bugs feel like exactly that, inexplicable little problems that have to be figured out, but that's what SRG 320 has done. As far as Outrun is concerned, it works great. Now moving on to another game that's seen improvements in this current core, it's Battle Garaga or Battle Garega. Every time I pronounce it, somebody says I should say it the other way, so now I've given you both. If you can come up with a third pronunciation, leave it down below. And this is another game that I think last time we talked about it, it had some layer priority issues in some of the parallax, but it has been some core since we've tested this, because I don't test every single game core to core to core. We kind of pop around to give you guys fresh footage here. But as far as the performance, as far as the visuals, as far as the gameplay, controls, and everything else, this game feels every bit as good as real Sega Saturn hardware. There might be a stray pixel in the continue screen, but otherwise I really couldn't see anything that made me think that there were problems here. And if you've never played this game before, I can't recommend it enough. There's so many amazing shmups on MiSTer FPGA on the Sega Saturn core, whether they're horizontal, vertical, bullet hell shmup, or otherwise, but this one definitely is in that top echelon of amazing games, and it's coming across so well on the core. And I really like testing shmup games as well, because it's one of the few instances in which if there was any issues with the inputs, any dropped inputs, lag, latency, or otherwise, you would 100% be able to tell and feel it, because these games require absolutely fast responses if you have any chance of not just continuing over and over again. And obviously MiSTer FPGA is basically a lag-free experience so long as you have the right controllers and you're not on wireless. Some wireless controllers give you a great experience as well, but because I don't know what you guys are using, I can never say 100% that wireless is perfect, but that's just how the technology works. But if you are hardwired into your MiSTer FPGA, you're playing the Sega Saturn core, and you're playing this game, it is absolutely every bit as good as real Sega Saturn hardware, and that's all that truly matters. If you can play the game the way you want, the same way you would play it on a real console, then it is as good as gold. And again, shmups are just one of those genres in which, at least to me, it's instantaneously apparent if there's any issues in the performance. Maybe that's just because I play a ton of them, I've always enjoyed them, and it is one of those things. If you play software emulation and you play a difficult shmup, if there is lag in the controls, then sometimes on Sega Saturn hardware there definitely is a couple frames in there, you will notice that your performance immediately suffers from that. It's the same thing on fighting games, but because I enjoy shmups a little bit more as far as testing are concerned, that's why I like to talk about them more. But with the current improvements, this game, Battle Garaga, Battle Garaga, whatever you want to call it, is 100% good to go. Now moving on to a game that probably no one even knows exists, this is the Sacred Pools. It is an FMV game, it is absolutely wild and ridiculous, and it is one that we've never shown on the testing series. And interestingly enough, it is one game that still has a bug in it. When it comes to the disc changing, it seems to freeze up, but this game has some really interesting and weird audio, so go ahead and listen for 30 seconds and I'll show you how it ends up freezing. More like a soundscape than a soundtrack, but it does really kind of drive home that sci-fi feel, and if you've never heard of this game before, trust me, give it a shot. It is absolutely absurd in all the best ways possible, because you have all of these strange characters right here that you basically have to face in the game. The makeup and costumes are absolutely over the top, definitely low budget, but it really does work as some sort of 90s cheesy FMV game, and because this was the era of FMV, it makes total sense that it was on the Sega Saturn, and it is fun to test some of these games that basically no one would ever think of, because for every game like a Touring Car Championship or a Dead or Alive or an Outrun, there are games like this that do need to be tested and bugs do need to be found, because maybe if you find a bug in this game and it gets patched up, it'll help other games as well. But I mean, who did they get to play this role with these basically fiber optic lights coming out of the back of their head? It is hilarious, it makes no sense, but you kind of have to love it for what it does. Unfortunately, when you do insert disk2, at least in this instance, it's going to basically have a loading issue. Then you're going to see the debug screen pop up onto the screen in the top left, rendering a bug because it couldn't read that second disk image. So there are still a few situations on MiSTer FPGA on the Saturn core where there can be some problems, but they are getting so few and far between. I really feel like we're 98% to a completed core. If you want to see other games tested, leave me a comment down below and give me some recommendations. And do be aware this is not on Update All. You need to grab the core files from the MiSTer FPGA Discords under the Sega Saturn channel or under the Unstable Nightly's channel. But we are done. There's a new Sega Saturn core. I can't recommend playing it enough, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.